Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author and comic creator Josh Grant, and today our special guest is Bryan W. Dull. I mean, Bryan writes he writes horror, he writes like a more kind of like a kind of a darker action series in a way, and it's a fantastic series. It's called the Solstice series. The link is down in the description if you want to check it out at any point throughout this. But just a bit about him before we bring him on. Bryan W. Dull writes books, which, if you really knew him, makes perfect sense, as that's all he has done since sixth grade, spinning a yarn at a moment's notice. He is best known for writing horror and suspense stories, with his first novel, Solstice, being his first experiment into publishing, and it's an excellent book, by the way. It was a bet to do it, by the way, and we'll ask him about that later. In 2016, he tried his hand at something different and published a personal story, Pill Hill. Now, Bryan W. Dull is becoming known for being a literary voice of hope, with some scares mixed into it occasionally. He lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana, with his wife and daughter, and plans on writing more stories that have something to say in this strange world that we live in. Now, Bryan, like I said, is a fantastic writer. He's been in the wings for just a little bit, so I don't want to leave him out there for too long. So let's bring him on. Bryan, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I've read your books for quite a while now. Actually, I've read the whole the Solstice trilogy at the time. Now it's about to have its fourth book here, and so it's really exciting to get to talk about it with you.
Awesome! I can't wait.
Yeah, well, before we get into the Solstice series, your newest one is Celestial. If anyone wants to check it out, like I said, description down in the description is all the links to Bryan's books. Please do. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about you. Let's go with like some show and tell. I always like to start with show and tell to introduce people. Did you bring us something, Bryan?
I did. It wasn't what I originally wanted because where that's at is very hard to get to. So I decided to go with the next thing that I knew I had available. And it's actually a book called The Thief of Always by Clive Barker.
Oh, cool.
And oddly enough, I hated reading in high school. I really did. I don't know what it was. I mean, there's a lot of great things that come out of things that you read in high school, Shakespeare, Langston Hughes, so on and so forth. But this was like the only book I read during my high school career that I wanted to. And one of the first ones I really enjoyed that was not a Stephen King book, because that's all that I knew before was just reading Stephen King books. And I really enjoyed this, and I really do recommend it for anybody. It's not, I mean, there are elements of horror, but it's a lot more than that, which is, I think, where it kind of comes from, where I write horror, but it's not just that.
Yeah, that's I was having a hard time like putting you in like one category when I was making the title for this, because you write horror, but it's kind of like also kind of like an action thriller, and like you said, it is also inspirational, at times. So Bryan Dull is secretly Clive Barker. Actually, that was actually his book.
Oh so. No, don't compare me to that great author. If I had a quarter of his talent, I'd be surprised.
You certainly do, though. I really do like your books, and so well, that's great. I connect with you, though. I used to hate reading, actually, growing up, and I wasn't a fan. I would just read whatever you had to read as part of school, and but unfortunately, I didn't get to read anything like truly great necessarily in high school. Like, we had to read like Great Expectations, and let me tell you, not my favorite. So I mean, there was a few good ones. 1984 is a good one, but all right, well, let's dive into just more of you, though. We're going to talk about Celestial in depth, your newest one in that Solstice series, and we'll talk about that in depth. But let's dive a bit into you. Like you've been making stories, as you claim, since sixth grade, right? It's like spinning a spool, and so what sparked that interest in you in the first place? Like, why did you want to just write books?
I don't know what made me want to write books per se. I just wanted to. Ever since I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, I've always been into movies.
Yeah.
And that's my passion. I love talking film. Same thing with even video games nowadays. There's some people kind of scoff at that, but there's a lot of games out there nowadays that are better than a lot of the movies that have been released. So I kind of I've taken those things, and I had to come to realization that I probably probably wasn't going to be an actor. I probably wasn't going to, be a big time screenwriter because I don't live in California or New York or anything like that. So I just I just did it. I just wanted to do it just to see if I could. And then it kind of just spun from that. And it's satisfying when you do that, whether it's around a campfire or you're just telling stories in general, and someone the next day is like, I really like that story. Like I just came up with it off the top of my head. So I just kind of took that and I'm like, well, maybe I can do something with that.
I'm gonna make you tell some campfire stories here. Not just
no, not right now.
Hey, yeah. Well, I appreciate. I say I'm a big movie buff and I'm a big video game player, so it's like both of those actually really inspired my own writing. Sonic over here, he's over here somewhere. Sonic thanks you. And so, hey, quick shout out here. Andrea Hintz, right? She says, we'll check the books out. So we have several people down there on our live chat. Welcome. SWYN_ as well. And so I always like to shout out our people down in the live chat. It's always fun to have people come in. If you have questions for Ryan, by all means, shoot them out there. We can bombard them. We'll put them in the hot seat. So how have your stories like evolved over the years though? Like from going back to 6th grade all the way back to like now, like how have you really felt like your stories have kind of changed?
I think with anything, when you're a kid, it's kind of just, this, and then you go to this, and then you go to this, and then hopefully it's cohesive enough. But as I've gotten older and life happened, you kind of just get a different sensibility. I'd like to think that it's a good sensibility, but with everything bad in the world, I have to believe that there's something great out there. And with say like Pill Hill, there was a time where I'll go ahead and just tell the story. I worked for GameStop as a store manager for about 6 years. And
you own all that stock now too.
Well, I have one share and I sold it. So I got like, I don't know, $60. Anyway, but what happened was one year, it was around the holidays, but the store got robbed 3 times, and I was held at gunpoint each of those times. I was there.
Wow.
And that created a very, I'm not going to say cynical, but very, I was very afraid of life.
Yeah.
After that. And I still am in a lot of ways. It's an ongoing process, but I've gotten better over time. But it just kind of made me realize I needed to confront things in my own way. Going back from when I was a teenager to even now. And Pill Hill was really the book that got me there. Like Solstice and Equinox, those are what they are. But someone interviewed me one time and just said, well, do you think you'll ever go away from horror or vampires or whatever? And I said, yeah, when I have something I need to say. And it finally came around that I think I have something personal I want to say. And that's where that book kind of came together from. And that's actually the easiest book that I've written, and it's also the longest book I've written so far. But it just, it came more naturally than Solstice did, because obviously vampires don't exist, I think. So
you're talking to one.
Okay, all right.
That's the Diabolic shrimp. So hey, well, I just think thanks so much for honestly sharing that personal journey, especially. It's like because I mean that's such a challenge. It's like when you're stolen from, right? It's like that's such a violation, and I can understand why that gives you almost that cynical view, and that's why you wrote Pill Hill, which is interesting. Pill Hill, by the way, for anyone that's listening, is kind of like a diversion kind of from your normal writing, Brian. It's like but that's why I found so fascinating about that. So I just really appreciate that you'd like tackled mental health head on, and you were brave enough to do that. So but you've also dabbled in other things, right? So it's like you've dabbled a bit in voice acting, right? A bit.
That's you're kind of romanticizing it more than it actually was. I had a few gigs that paid me a little bit of money. But
that's more gigs than I ever had voice acting. I used to be an actor, but I act on the stage. But I've always been fascinated about the world of voice acting. So just tell us a bit about it's like these gigs that you dabbled a bit.
Well, it was more of an amateur level. I was part of this group called the Voice Acting Alliance, and everybody there was wanting to be a voice actor. They wanted to try it out, and then you had people kind of producing their own thing, whether they were taking animation or anime and redubbing it in English or something like that. It was more projects than it was anything else. But from that, there was a few things. I did a radio play. It was remote, but it was a Doctor Who radio play they were doing over in the UK, and I had a small role in that.
I just want to hear you say like timey-wimey nonsense.
But I didn't know who Doctor Who was when I was doing that. I'm like I knew of them, whatever, but I didn't. I didn't know about Time Lords. I didn't know about Daleks. I didn't know, any of these things. I just went in there just being one of these companions in this radio play for I don't know which Doctor it was supposed to be. I couldn't tell you to save my life. But that was just one of the things. There was another gig where it was a German movie. And I just did a voice dub over it. I've never seen it. I don't even know if it even came out.
I just want to hear you, like part of my family is German and I speak some German, but I just want to hear you like, German's such a growly language. So I just want to hear you like translate German. That'd be fun.
It's tough. Because, it's very if they're yelling, it's very harsh, even though it's probably maybe in English it wouldn't be normally. But it wasn't that big of a role, so I didn't have too much hard of a time with it.
So as everyone's watching this, right, just imagine Bryan just voice acting. He's got the voice for it. He definitely does. So we're not even gonna make him imagine now. I'm gonna make you do some voice acting right now. You have to say, come check out my book Celestial in your like gruff townskeeper voice. Okay, so you gotta be that gruff medieval townskeeper like an NPC, and you have to say, come check out my book Celestial. You ready?
Okay, hold on.
I'm putting on the spot.
I'm imagining myself in like an Elder Scrolls Skyrim situation, like when you're talking to somebody.
That's right. I used to be an adventurer.
Exactly, guy took an arrow to the knee. Let's see. Oh man, you got me on the spot.
I know. I'm sorry, Bryan.
Come check out my book Celestial. Out in 10 days. I don't know.
Yes, that's perfect. That's great. I love it. Thanks for playing ball. I'm sorry I put you on the spot there. Writing. Let's dive in a bit to your series, right? Solstice and it's your newest one is Celestial. That's about to come out. So you said that it was a bet to publish Solstice.
It was a kind of more of a bet to myself.
Nice.
The story goes, and I've told it a million times. Some people on here might already know it. Solstice, let me take that back. Originally, back in like 2000, early 2000s, the character of Gavin in the Solstice book was the idea, and it was just him. And I started writing it as a screenplay for like HBO, Showtime, something like that. Kind of a spec script sort of thing. And I never finished it because there was something missing. I wasn't like him as a character. I knew what I wanted to do, but there was something missing. So there was no balance to his character. And eventually some time time happened, and I had my daughter, and it was around the time the whole Twilight thing, the big craze was going on.
Yeah.
And my wife likes those books and those movies. Good for her. And but I just kind of, and it's not that I have anything against those books or movies or anything like that. I just like getting her go.
I do. I'll say it for you. I had friends that dove deep into the Twilight well, and I was just like, it's not my cup of tea. So,
right.
But go on.
Yeah, I just like to rag on her about it. She would just get she wouldn't get mad. She would just give me that look,
yeah. I definitely got that look too.
And I just told her, one day I was like, I think I could probably crap out a better story this on the fly. And then that's just kind of where it started. And I was like, and I didn't realize at the time that I could just publish. Like I thought I had to go through the motions, which I'm still going to go do eventually. But I just self-published it, and through another party. I didn't do it all by myself because I didn't know enough. Now I do though. When I come out with a book, it's all done. Everything, the formatting, everything's done between me and my wife. So it just makes it a lot easier that way. But that's how it started.
Well, that's awesome. I was like, and I was like, you definitely wrote it's a very different story from Twilight. If you're a huge fan of Twilight and you hear us ragging on Twilight, come buy Bryan's books and you can judge them harshly. But it's I love just seeing different genres. Like in a way, yours is. I didn't want to write down below in the title of this that it's like vampire stuff, because it's like that's where nowadays a lot of people's minds go when they hear vampire. They hear
Right.
Twilight, and it's a very different. It's more like along the lines of like Blade in a way. It's like
well, when you reviewed one of them initially, you talked about it being The Last of Us.
Yeah, and that's what the
came
feel
out,
I got from it.
Well, and back then when I would describe it, The Last of Us hadn't been out yet, but when I described it, if anybody's ever seen like The Professional, Leon the Professional, that's why I kind of compared it to. Yeah, nice. and Blade too. It's funny that you mentioned Blade.
Yeah, well, it kind of that's what I was having a hard time putting it in like one category, but they really did have like kind of a feel of like some of those movies though.
Right, Lone Wolf and Cub. Those old Japanese films.
Yeah, and and that's actually one of the things I just loved about it. It's just that kind of like, again, that kind of like feel of like, in a way, like the Last of Us. It wasn't entirely, but it's like, but it is kind of like sort of that dynamic. So, well, let's since we're talking about it, tell us a bit about Celestial and just like the whole Solstice series in general.
Well, the whole Solstice series in general is based on that vampirism is being created the old-fashioned way. You can feed them blood, whatever, but it's also happening through sexually transmitted diseases, and primarily from those who have the AIDS virus or HIV virus. And so it's being spread well, at least in the first book, it's being spread through prostitution, and it's not by accident. Like, this is like a legitimate plan that's been put in place. So Gavin is kind of this very broken character. In the first book, it's a first person perspective, which at the time when I wrote it, I didn't know there was going to be a second one. I didn't even know there was going to be a fourth one. I was just writing it just for the sake of writing it. And I needed to show how broken this guy was. Like, he just he's on his own little mission, but everything else he didn't care about. He didn't mind living in squalor. He didn't mind taking the money from the people that his victims or whatever, the vampires that have had a on there.
Me, I don't mind taking all your money and
exactly.
This is all free, by the way.
There's no real remorse overall. And then what ends up happening is he comes in contact with this little girl who calls herself Solstice, that she named herself, and she's kind of the best of both worlds, human and vampire, because she was born of a human mother. And so, but she has other powers too that go way past any power of a normal vampire would have. So as the series progresses, it's more about her more than anything, going through the motions, going from a child, going to a teenager in a very short span of time, by the way, into a woman. And And that's really what it is, and the people that she meets along the way. And one of the things that I will admit with the original book, because I had no idea what was going to happen with it, is that there was a lot of like questions that needed answers. And when Equinox came out, some of those questions are answered, but then Ecliptic, which is the one that's the newest one that's out now, I kind of went back and really gave a backstory to the villain that really needed it, which I always had in mind. I just hadn't done it yet. And so I can't stand in movies when there's a villain and he's just a villain or he or she's the villain for the sake of being a villain.
Uh-huh.
I don't believe in that. There has to be a genesis to where somebody becomes who they are. And Ecliptic, the third book, really dives into that a lot more than anything else. I mean, Solstice, of course, being the main character, but I really just wanted to give a lot of backstory. So Celestial, the new one that comes out on the 19th, picks up right where the third book left off, like just
nice.
Moments later. Because initially Ecliptic and Celestial were supposed to be one book. I wanted to make it a trilogy. But I was looking at this book and I was like, this thing's going to be just a behemoth. And so I didn't, in my mind, I didn't want to be like Solstice, and then this big old book. So I broke it into two parts. Yeah, exactly. And I broke it into two parts. And the reason I did that is because I really wanted 4 books, because I really wanted to create the puzzle that
cool.
that the covers create.
Nice. Yeah, get them up there. Oh, that's cool.
Yep.
I did. I've read them all, and I never actually noticed that. I mean,
Yeah,
of
so
course, I end up reading a lot of these digitally, even though I prefer paper typically. But just to do
right.
it, but
So
that's so cool.
yeah, so that's, and then Ecliptic goes under one of these. I'm not sure. I think Solstice, and then Celestial when that comes out will have. I don't have it on me right now, but it's green. With black, and it completes this picture of what Solstice in my mind, the outline of her anyway, would look like.
I love that. I love that. You see, I love things like that. That was something I was trying to do for a while with my horror books. It's just but because they're gonna have 4 too, and it was gonna tell this like continuous scene, but I'm not there yet. But that's so cool to see.
You know where that idea came from? You ever seen John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness?
Yes. Yeah.
And he's cutting the book covers, and it makes a map of like New Hampshire or whatever.
Nice.
And I was just like, that is so cool. But I'm like, I didn't want to go anywhere that detailed.
Yeah.
But
Bryan Dull is secretly also John Carpenter.
Oh.
He's Clive Barker and John Carpenter. No. Or not. So yeah, I mean, you just have this fantastic series, by the way. I always hype it out there because I read it all, and something you kind of mentioned is like each book is almost like its own thing, even though it's a series. And like you said, the first one you didn't like realize it was going to be like anything more and stuff. But yeah, like each book it has its own like depth. It has its own like thing to it, and that's what I liked about it. It's like every book was part of the series, but it felt different in a way. And I guess I don't know exactly how to articulate it. I don't want to spoil anything, but
like I said, I never want when I was toying with the notion of this becoming a series, I just didn't want it to be one of those things. It was like, okay, then this happens, and then this happens, which it does, which all sequels do that. But I didn't want it to be like, oh, we're in trouble again. Oh, are there werewolves around? There's not, by the way. Which is like these tropes that a lot of these series I thought seemed to have, but I didn't want to do that. Like Solstice is a vampire book. But when the second one came out, I wanted to tell a ghost story incorporated with it. And then the third one, to me, it's not the third one to me, the vampires, while some of them are the villains, the majority of that book, the humans are the villain, not the vampires.
Yeah. So I noticed that though. It's just about yours. Like you turn these like kind of classic tropes on their head, and I loved that. I loved it. I loved it personally. And so, shout out real quick to SWYN _. They say hello.
Hi.
So
thank you for watching.
Yeah. And so here, let's you kind of mentioned it before, but like, what kind of existing series would you say is like it's sort of similar to? I know it's not going to like hit it like right on, but it's
series,
like not necessarily even books. It could be movies or games too.
Probably The Last of Us, even though I haven't even gotten into the second one yet. I can imagine though it being that, because if I really want to put a comparison to the Ellie character in Solstice, she goes from being this very wide-eyed, I hope life can be grand, and then by the time you get to Ecliptic, it's just like it didn't turn out that way, and she just becomes a little bit more gruff, more crass, a lot like Gavin in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Those certain traits, she just kind of started getting beaten down by everything that's going around. She knows what she has to do, but it's just she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to be that way.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned like Solstice and Gavin. Like, what was your inspiration for like creating them? I mean, you kind of said like Solstice in a way was kind of like the balance for Gavin earlier. You said that, and how she was kind of like you were inspired by your daughter in a way. So it's like but right. What was kind of your inspiration for creating Gavin then?
Can I curse on here? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's okay.
I just really like an asshole character.
Yeah.
I just really do. There's something that can be fun about them. And I also think there was a review recently I got where they didn't, on Solstice, where they didn't like the Gavin character. And I'm always floored when I read that, because it's like, why does the main character have to be this likable person? Isn't the point of having characters with flaws to watch them grow in some way or try to overcome them? So it's always surprising to me. I just like a character doesn't know what he wants to be, or even she for that matter. I don't, or what to do in life, or how to be. They want to be better, but they don't know how, or maybe they don't want to. Characters like that, whether it's a hero or a villain, always has intrigued me. And sometimes the heroes become the villains, and sometimes the villains become the heroes. So it's I always like that kind of dynamic.
Well, I always strive to be the unlikable character on this show,
Okay.
so it makes you more likable.
Okay.
Yeah, that and SWYN is the unlikable one. He's calling you out on your language.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't read his books then. They got a few more bad words in there. Yeah. So like you have this great moral dilemma in your series, and you kind of wrap them in like you said, like you like to make these characters that are real. They have this background, right? And so like, and you put all that work into your books. What was one of your personal like just favorite scenes to write?
One of my favorite scenes. Is that a really thing? Is with book scenes? I always call them scenes too, but they're not because they're not in film.
I do that too. I'm getting that way now that I make comics. It's like everything's like a scene and stuff. So,
I think the one that reaches me the most, that I remember coming across the most, was the beginning of Ecliptic. And I'm not going to spoil any. I don't want to spoil.
I know
it's hard.
It's hard to talk about without spoiling because you have all these great twists. But
Solstice is at a bar having a conversation with one of the people, one of the vampires that's kind of on her side on the crusade, and he's mentioning a character that she's remembering, and he's just kind of laying it down like this person was not who you think he was. He never was. Stop pretending that he was this better person than what they were. And not to get too much into the book, but sometimes you just have to hear it from somebody else. You know, just like, look, this is what it is. Sorry, hate to put it like it, but sometimes you just have to be blunt with that. And that was the thing that I remember most. This realization that she had to make about the situation that she was in. Once again, it's really, I know it's vague, but I can't go into too much without
no worries,
ruining something from another book.
Well, and it's like, and I try to make these like questions a bit vague. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything because like you really do have these great twists in your book, especially with your characters. Like, and you kind of put your characters through the ringer a bit. What was one of the hardest scenes for you to write? But without, again, I mean, it's kind of hard, but it's like without spoiling.
there's essentially a torture scene in Ecliptic that goes on for a while. Because I was trying to create this, and hopefully I did it well. This kind of suspense is like, this isn't just like a short chapter and we move on. Like, this is going on for a long time, and I really wanted to create this. Is somebody going to come and help? You know, like, is this person dead? It's like, I just wanted to create this chapter that seemed to kind of go on and on and on. Not in a bad way necessarily, but I just really wanted to keep the suspense going, and the way that the mechanism that they're tied to, and what it's doing is it's kind of messed up.
But sometimes it's like building that tension. It's like we as writers, we get to do that. It's part of the fun sometimes is like you try to elicit these like emotions in your reader, right? And you try to build that. And it's like, and sometimes it's like, especially like you write kind of these like darker, kind of grittier novels here. And I got my start writing horror, and doing that is like, sometimes you have to kind of get the reader to kind of feel like, oh, it's a bit of an endurance game. You want them to kind of feel like on the other end, they came out as something with the characters. That's how you kind of bond with them. So yes, I was like, I do know the scene you're talking about though. So if you personally had the opportunity to become a vampire or a vampire hybrid, would you?
No.
Why?
To be an immortal being watching everybody else around me die, it's not. No, I couldn't do it. I know there's a lot of benefits to it, but I'm too attached to people in my life to watch that happen. I couldn't imagine being a vampire and eventually watch my daughter become old.
Hard. Yeah.
You know, I couldn't imagine that. But then again, if there was if there was nobody and I was just at, like, woo, partying all the time, like maybe. But the way my life is now, no, absolutely not.
Bryan Dull writes these like darker, kind of grittier novels. Heart of Gold, though. Heart of Gold.
I do what I can. Stop.
So this is the final book in the series, right? And so like, what do you want readers who read the full series to just kind of walk away with?
I just want people to enjoy it. You don't really have, it's great if you take something from a book, but sometimes people don't, and that's okay too. I just want it to be enjoyed. I also want it to be, I want it to be kind of this study, and this is wishful thinking, but the study on how someone goes from writing a first book and then where it goes with the last book.
Cool.
Because I think, when some of these books first came out, it wasn't the best edited book on the planet. I've gone back since then and redone these books recently. But it also, though, I mean, I didn't change the story fundamentally in any kind of way. I didn't want to do that. But I just kind of curious to see, like, oh, I can see how he's learned over, because this series technically spans. It took me 10 years to get through the series because I wrote Solstice and Equinox. I took a break. I did Pill Hill and then I did Small Hearts. And then I came back to
Small Hearts is good too.
Oh, thank you. And I just kind of just want to see people go like, oh, I see where he kind of started off as this novice in a way, and then where it kind of ended up. And and that's one of the things about independent publishing, because people are brutal. They can be brutal on your reviews, but yes. the thing about that is they're not technically wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And so instead of being offended by it, I could sit there and just pout in the corner for however many minutes being bad at it, or I could just
that's what I do in this corner over here. This is my writer's pouting corner. I sit with Spider-Man and cry myself to sleep.
But the funny thing though, even with all of its editing flaws it originally had when it came out 10 years ago, people still liked it. And I went back to the books, and now that they're edited better, I want people to like it more, and hopefully that happens.
I found it to be a fantastic series. So you've done a great job all the way through it. I feel like my writing's actually going the opposite. Like I think I started as the expert and I'm now in novice mode by this point. So that's why I do comics now, it makes it easier. So for you, and since we're talking about writing just a bit, what's one piece of walk away writing advice that you would love for? We have a lot of aspiring writers that are on here that always like to ask questions. So it's like what would be one great piece of advice for future writers and current writers too?
If you truly love doing it, just keep doing it. Your first book may be not so great. And that's okay, because in the end, it's yours. And take from what you learn, and hopefully good things come out of it. But just keep going. If you get to the point where you're writing and it starts feeling like a chore, then stop doing it for a while. I'm envious of people who just write book after book after book after book. I'm like, well, good for you. I can't do that. And it's not because I hate writing. It's because I'm so meticulous. I try to be anyway. I have papers with lines Beautiful Mind style pointing in every Pill Hill. The way they're in the circle when they're doing their little meeting, mm-hmm. that's on purpose. I designate where each person was sitting, knowing where they could see or how they react to people. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. And I like doing it. So I think as long as you like doing it, just keep on doing it. Learn as you go. Take the criticism. It's fine. Everybody has it. A bad review is not a death sentence. Sometimes people buy the book to see if they agree with that review.
Actually, I was gonna say good and bad reviews actually sell books.
Yeah. So. It really does. I mean, and also too, pay it back too. Review books. Not you don't have to do a review where it's 2 paragraphs long. You could do a review by just leaving stars. because that helps authors, independent and regular signed authors, give their books some momentum in the algorithms for Amazon and whatnot. Yeah. So
that was a subtle shot at me. I'm working on it, Brian. Your new book isn't out yet. I'll get on it.
Look, you've read more books of mine than I thought anybody would ever. So I appreciate that.
So kind of a final question before we get into reading some of your pages, right? Because I want to show off your writing. Like, it's excellent. So it's like, but I always ask this of all of our authors, like, what would be like an existing franchise, like whether it's movies, books, or video games, that you would love to write a story in, if you had the opportunity to?
Well, there's two that come to mind. When it comes to TV shows and movies, there's two things: Ghostbusters,
yes,
and the anime show Cowboy Bebop.
Yes. Oh, I love Cowboy Bebop.
Those are the two things that, and as far as entertainment goes, that I love the most. So, I even actually talked to like the principal photography person on the Cowboy Bebop show that's coming out on Netflix. But I would give anything to be able just to dip my finger in an episode, even if it was in a minor way, something like that. Or like with Ghostbusters, if they ever, not so much a movie maybe, but like if they ever created some kind of series in that world, I'd like to get my hands on that.
Yeah, sure. If they bring the cartoon back.
Oh God, those cartoons were creepy back in the 80s. Yeah. Man, you look at it now and you're like, ugh. But back then, when you were a kid, Saturday morning.
I was like, nightmares for days as a kid. The Christmas episode. Yeah, it's like
the Boogeyman episode
scared the bejesus out of me. Yeah. So, all right. Well, hey, let's dive in a bit. You provide some pages from this from Celestial, yes. So yes. The upcoming one. So no one's gotten a chance to see this yet. Set the scene for us, Brian. Like, what's going on here, and who are these people?
So basically, this set of pages is focusing on a character named Scott, who is introduced in the third book, and he's hiding. He's not a patient, but he's hiding with a group of other people in a hospital to get away from the pandemic that eventually happens. Sorry, spoiler alert.
It's timely for now anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it kind of came out at a strange time.
Yeah.
And that wasn't planned, by the way. Yeah. And then he's talking to the main antagonist, the villain, basically over all of these books, Leland. And they're kind of making an agreement, so to speak.
Groovy. So. Okay. Well, and we'll dive on in. I'll narrate, but who would you like to play, Leland or Scott?
I'll do Leland.
All right, sweet.
Why not?
So who you have the voice for it, so it works.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll work out my Scott voice. Okay. All right, here we go. And scene. Scott Gotchenauer. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I was like, I never actually heard it out loud. Scott Gotchenauer couldn't help but look at his hands. His pinky finger was still missing, but his skin became clear again, like it was long before the pandemic had started. He hadn't eaten any food, but he felt no hunger. Did you make me a vampire? Scott asked. Leland leaned against the building, watching as Scott's complexion began to clear.
No, not at all. I didn't give you enough to drink to make that happen, but I could.
Leland replied. Leland was staring now, and Scott became self-conscious. What is it? Scott asked. Leland was always amazed every time someone drank his blood that the effects could come instantaneously. The lesions all over his face began to shrink. Scott began to look like the person he was before.
You are a handsome young man, Scotty,
Leland told him with a pinch of flirtation. Scott nervously smiled and continued to look at his hands. He knew that Leland wanted something because he was old enough to know that something good rarely costs nothing. He brought his hands down and began nodding to himself, building up the courage to ask Leland, the angel in his eyes, the question that needed to be asked. What is it you want? Leland smiled. Most humans he encountered never questioned his motives so soon, but Scott was different. Listen, mister, I have been through the muck and back, and I don't even mean this pandemic that your kind started. I mean with my family and people in general.
It sounds like you have had quite the life there, Scotty boy.
Leland said. Scotty shook his head and replied, Scott, just Scott. You want to know throw adult problems at me? You address me like one. No more of this Scotty shit. My mom still calls me that. It drives me up the damn wall. Leland wanted to laugh at the idiom Scott had just said because he always found those sayings amusing. Still, he remained composed to take Scott seriously.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Leland apologized. Scott looked at Leland's unique face, outlining all the edges of his nose and chin. So, Scott pressed on, what is it you want?
Getting to the point. I respect that.
Leland thought.
The woman that Alan and you are hiding in that building, I need her. She could be the one that could help us turn this whole pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, around. Your leader is keeping her from us on purpose. I need your help with bringing her to me.
Leland explained. Scotty took a deep breath and watched the cold mist release from his mouth. That's funny. He told us that you all wanted her to do an experiment on for your vampire agenda. Leland shook his head and replied,
That's the thoughts of a madman. That man up there is keeping you alive even though you are clearly ill. Did you know he was a doctor before this, whose job was to make people feel better and offer choices and cures? What choice has he made for you? What cures? Nothing. He has the power literally throwing through him, and he gives you micro-sized doses for you to keep you all going. It's selfish.
Scotty agreed with Leland. He had wondered the same thing, but he refused to believe that Alan was a selfish person. Why not just go in there yourself? Scott asked. Scott was smarter than he had initially let on and irritated Leland much. He made his hands into fists and growled,
Because my way is the correct way. Others can't see the bigger picture. I can bring unity while others choose to keep us, vampire and human, divided.
For the second time, Leland was going against those that trusted him to bring their plan to fruition. While Onesia and her group wanted to walk among humans, Leland wanted humans to become vampires. Only then would unity occur. Leland continued to bring his human past into the equation to believe that humans were the pandemic, not vampires, and a plague to this world.
Just look at you now and what you were mere minutes ago.
Leland pleaded.
How does that not make you see the ails you can be fixed? What ails you can be fixed, sorry.
No worries. Scott turned towards Leland and replied, This is not a fix. This is temporary, just like what he does. The only difference is you gave me more. How do I know there isn't a cure for this, whatever it is, and he just doesn't have the supplies?
You can't afford to be this naive.
Leland sighed. Promise to turn us? Scott asked.
What?
Make the promise that we will become vampires, and maybe I can get people behind your cause. Leland wanted to tell Scott that he wouldn't get any more people than what was already coming, that becoming a vampire wouldn't take away their disease fully. However, he wanted more vampires in the world, and now he had a bargaining chip he didn't have before.
Fine.
Leland reluctantly agreed.
But you will need something to prove to the others what you are preaching.
Dun, dun, dun. And we'll leave it there on the cliffhanger. Yep. So Leland, scum. So I know exactly. That's why I was like, you have to read to find out. That's why you like to put depth into your villain. So well, Brian, for everyone watching at home, once again, this is the Solstice series. It's linked back down below there. So check it out if you get an opportunity. Brian, how else can we as a community support you?
Well, I have a website, www.bryandullbooks.com, and you can sign in there and get updates whenever I post something or blog something, whatever the case may be. Instagram, you can look for me on writer_Bryan with a Y, and that should pull up my profile there. And then on Facebook, it's facebook.com/solstice.chronicles, and then that'll take you to my author page as well.
Groovy, yeah, and if you ever want to make him do some voice acting on the spot, then by all means, head over there and head over there and write him, and he'll send you a video. That's
sure
for free.
For $1 million.
Yeah. Hey, Brian, it was just so fantastic to have you here on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm going to send you back down below, but we're working on a big check-in section in the future for Diabolic Shrimp. So hopefully we'll get a chance to have you back on in a couple months and
Oh
see
yeah,
how
that'd
it's
be great.
going. So,
Thank you.
all
Thanks
right,
everyone.
well, yeah, Bryan, thanks for being on the show. So, well, that was Bryan Dull once again. His books are down there in the description. Do please go support him. He's a wonderful guy. Just writes these fantastic books that are just kind of these like gritty, kind of darker vampire books, kind of The Last of Us, kind of like what we were saying. If you enjoyed Diabolic Shrimp, please do hit that subscribe button down below. Leave some comments. I'll be sure that Bryan gets those as well. And check out my books. They're down there below too. Any extra money that I make from this, I put towards universally good things like childhood disease research and like ocean exploration. So please do come check us out again. Thanks for visiting. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.